Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Namaduhu wa nasalli ala Rasul al-Kareem. Viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners. People plan, and sometimes their plans succeed and sometimes their plans don't succeed. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan always succeeds. Whatever He plans, it's always successful. So human beings plan according to the knowledge that they have. So they make big plans, and some plans are successful so that they become encouraged and they feel their planning is going to make them successful. And especially, we know in the field of politics, politicians are making big plans and people are impressed and they win elections. For example, the President of the United States, Trump, made plans to make America great. His campaign was run on this slogan, to make America great once again. So he did his planning according to his thinking, according to his knowledge, and many millions of people were impressed by his plan. But the people didn't know what was coming. So the human knowledge is not enough, doesn't have knowledge of the future. So the result is before everybody's eyes. Who could have imagined a few months ago that the United States would be in a situation where people would be sitting at home, not being allowed to go to their jobs, not allowed to do business. This is something to show the world that even the most powerful nation on earth cannot have control over events. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone has power over all the things that happen in this world. So the ulama say planning is not disallowed. People should make plans. Or when they make plans, they should keep the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in mind. If they make plans that violate the orders of Allah, then they will get into bigger problems. Like, for example, the robber or the robbers plan to rob bank and then take millions and then enjoy themselves. So their plans become successful. They're able to rob the bank. But down the road, they may get caught and they spend the rest of their life in jail. So this happens many times. People have plans to rip people off. Businesses make plans how to make more money at the expense of the others, the doctors and the dentists and the lawyers and other businesses are making plans all the time how they can earn more and become successful. Whether they become successful or not, of course, is not in their control. Sometimes their plan works and they feel very elated, they feel very satisfied and consider themselves great planners and successful. But down the road there may be there may be big problems which bring all their plans to a standstill. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the human being control over some things. If he makes plans which are consistent with the commandments of Allah, there's no violation, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts blessings in those plans. And if he makes plans which are in disobedience of Allah, then there are problems. Both the success and the failure are hidden. A human being planning is is not so strong, or is not so effective when it comes to the future. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told him to obey the commandments and to follow the rules. And once he does that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put blessings and make his plan successful. Throughout history, we have seen great nations, great powers had great plans, and they had great resources. And despite their resources and their great planning, they brought destruction upon themselves. So this is a big lesson of history, that if you make plans that anger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that violate His commandments, then you will have a lot of suffering. So the Quran keeps mentioning this. When you desire things in disobedience to Allah, do things that Allah doesn't like, then you will have problems in this life and bigger problems in the next life. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made plans also, but his plans were to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he was given prophethood, his plan was to reach out to people, as many people as he could. And he started reaching out to people. So that was the planning he was doing. And the people who came into Islam, they also started doing the planning. They were not planning to kill people. They were not planning to destroy the community. They were planning to bring them close to Allah, to bring blessings into their lives. And the others, his enemies, were also planning. They were planning to get rid of him. So they made their great plans, and we know from history that all their planning failed. All the efforts they made, although they were greater in number, in resources, in everything, their planning was reduced to nothing. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept striving, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept guiding him. So every obstacle that he was facing from his own people was removed by Allah. So the lesson we learn from this is that the job of the human being is basically to obey Allah, to live his life in obedience to Allah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does the planning for him. We know Sulaiman al-Islam and Dawud al-Islam were kings. They were prophets and they were also kings. But their kingdom was running very smoothly, very successfully, because their planning was according to the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Pharaoh was also doing planning. His planning was against the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Qarun was a very wealthy man. He was a great planner too. And same was the case with Haman. He was a great planner too. But their planning was in violation of the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a lesson for all people in authority, especially, who make big plans to control people, to control resources, to empower themselves, to win elections. And they do all kinds of things to stay in power, to enjoy the wealth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows them that their planning is no more than the planning of a spider. When the owner of the house comes, he takes a broom and he cleans out all the spiders. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of this creation. When He makes a plan, He has the power to implement, to enforce the plan. And this is why human beings should know that the real power, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power, is beyond anyone's comprehension. One angel of Allah is so big that the whole creation is like a little plate in his hand. It said the angel of death. He can hold the whole creation in his one hand. So that's imagine this is just one angel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how big he is. Jibreel al-Islam is so big that all the creation would, that we see would not be able to contain him in that. That is his real form. So Allah's power is greater than the power of the angels. And Allah's power is with His deen, with His commandments. And anyone who practices that, Allah's help is with that person. So anyone who is practicing the, the religion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent through His prophets, he has that power of Allah behind him. And that power is so great that all the powers of the world put together are no match for it. And Allah has shown throughout history when He sent prophets, like Ibrahim al-Islam had no power compared to the king he was facing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him victorious against the king. We know Musa al-Islam had no power compared to the Pharaoh. He was no match, but the power of Allah was behind Musa al-Islam, and Pharaoh was removed. And same is the case with the other prophets. All the prophets were not given the worldly power, the worldly resources, possessions, because if they had been given and they were victorious against the powers they were facing, nobody would have been surprised. If Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had been given enormous wealth and power, armies, and he prevailed over his opponents, nobody would have been surprised with that. They would have expected that to happen. But what's surprising is that without resources, he was able to prevail over them, to show that the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was behind him. And anyone can get that power provided he follows that path. That is not just for the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some people think because he was a prophet, the power of Allah was behind him and he was able to prevail over the people of that time, all the opponents. But that formula, that method of success is available for anybody till the end of times. That's why his life is a model for all humanity. Those nations, those people who followed that model, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevated them. And those nations that rejected that model were humiliated and brought destruction upon themselves. So for planning purposes, coming back to the question of planning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it very clear that when you conduct your affairs, whatever affairs you are involved in, you keep the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in mind. And you keep the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in mind. This is the formula for success. What is the order of Allah and how this was put into practice. And this is where the ulama knowledge that comes in. They are the experts to guide people as to what are the commandments of Allah. In most cases, the commandments are clear, everybody knows, but sometimes it may not be so clear. So people have to seek the knowledge from the ulama, people who are genuinely knowledgeable in matters of faith, in matters of religion, and to know how this was implemented by Rasulullah. This can come only with the people who make the effort to learn that. And many times in Muslim countries, the rulers are not aware of that. They make decisions without understanding how this is to be practiced. They think, they just assume they know the answers to the situations. Recently, there was an issue in Pakistan over the building of a temple in the capital city of Islamabad. And we are told that the government promised to pay millions of rupees for the construction of a temple. Now, they might be thinking that they are doing a good deed by constructing a temple for the minorities, for the Hindu community. But if you look at the life of Rasulullah, the teachings that he was sent with, the teaching that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him, and the teaching of the Quran, then you would be surprised that something like that would happen in a Muslim country that was established just for the sake of Islam. There was no reason for the establishment of Islam for Pakistan. If Pakistan was to do the same things as are being done in India, there was no reason for that, because there are millions of Muslims who live in India, and there are millions of Muslims who live in other parts of the world. And if Pakistan was to be a secular country just like India or the United States or Britain or whatever, then there was no need for Pakistan. The only reason Pakistan was established was for the government to enforce the Sharia, the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And since the very beginning, they have not done that. And they keep doing things which are done in any secular country. And they're bringing grief upon themselves. And the people are not understanding what the problem is. The common people do not understand that Pakistan is not following the ideology for which it was created. It's an ideological state. It was established for a reason, to have an economic, political, social system that was based entirely on Islam. And what came out was a hodgepodge, a combination, a little bit of Islam here and there, and secularism and other types of isms all over the place. And people have still not been able to understand why it's not going in the right direction. Because the people in power do not understand Islam. They have come from backgrounds where there was no Islamic training. Their education was completely secular. And they just assume that because they are Muslims, they know enough Islam to practice this. And same is the case with the leaders in the institutions, like the army, the civil service, the judiciary. Most people in top positions have little or no knowledge of Islam. And they make policies, they make plans that are completely opposed to the teachings of Islam. So all their plans fall to the ground, become useless. The economy is based on an un-Islamic system, and it's not prospering, it's not taking off, because the basis is wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a complete economic system, a complete political system, and that system is not being put into practice. The people who are in positions to implement, the planners, the people at the top positions, are not knowledgeable enough, and they do not have the purity of intention. The first requirement, of course, is to have the intention to bring about an Islamic state. And if the people do not even have that intention, then they're not going to make plans that will be consistent with the practices of Islam. So each time these things come up, there's a crisis. The community, the people are confused. The people don't know which way to go because they don't have the knowledge. The people who have the knowledge are not vocal enough or if they are vocal, then they are put aside. This is very important for the people to understand that success will not come to, to people if they are violating the orders, no matter how big the planning is. They've been planning in Pakistan throughout the history of Pakistan, but all the plans have failed. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of planners. If people plan according to his commandments, then the plans will be successful. Otherwise, they will be failures. We ask Allah to give us the understanding of the practices of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa akhir dawana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.